You never expect the world to end on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday. You imagine cataclysmic events, dramatic confrontations, something worthy of the pain. But no. For me, it began with a silence so deep and heavy in our home that it had its own weight, its own presence, like a third person sitting at the kitchen table with me, judging the life I had built. The old clock on the wall, a wedding gift from my mother that had ticked through 4 decades of our marriage, now sounded like a hammer against an anvil, each tick an accusation, each talk a reminder of time slipping through my fingers, wasted on a beautiful, meticulously crafted lie. My husband, Michael, had just returned from one of his countless business dinners. He didn't just look tired, he looked emptied, haunted. He was a man carrying a secret so heavy it was bending his spine. He gave a performance of exhaustion I had come to know well. The sigh as he tossed his jacket on the sofa, the slow, deliberate loosening of his tie as if it were a noose, the way he collapsed onto the bed without even bothering to shower. The familiar scent of his expensive cologne hung in the air, but it was now tainted, mixed with a new alien fragrance, a sweet floral perfume, cheap and brazen. It felt like an intrusion, a violation of the sacred space of our home, a scent that whispered a confession I was too terrified to hear. A few minutes later, the gentle rhythmic hum of his snoring began, a sound that for 40 years had been my lullaby, my reassurance that all was well in our world, now felt like a mockery, a lullaby for a fool who had been blind for far too long. I moved then with the quiet, practiced grace of a wife who knows every creak in the floorboards, every sigh of her own home. I began to tidy his trail, a path of discarded belongings that felt like clues in a mystery I didn't want to solve. His jacket, his wallet, his old laptop, and then his cell phone. The screen was still lit, casting a pale, ghostly glow in the dim room. A new email glowed on the screen like a sinister omen. My breath hitched. Michael never used email. He was a man of calls and face-to-face meetings. "Clara," he'd always say, "all this tech nonsense is for the young ones. I'd rather hear a voice." But there it was. A digital ghost from a life I didn't know he was leading? Out of a morbid, heart-pounding curiosity that felt both wrong and utterly necessary, I tapped the screen. The message was brutally short, a handful of words that landed like physical blows to my chest. "You were incredible tonight, Dad." It was followed by a single red heart emoji, a symbol of love that now felt like a shard of ice piercing my own. Dad. The word echoed in the hollowed-out chambers of my mind. It made no sense. Who was calling him that? In such an intimate, adoring tone? My thumb, trembling and cold, swiped down, searching for more, for a name, for a reason. But there was nothing. Just a jumble of letters for an email address. A digital ghost that offered no answers, only a bottomless pit of terrifying questions. A shiver, cold and profound, ran through my entire body. It wasn't the chill of the night. It was the cold wind of a truth I had been avoiding, blowing in through a crack in the door of my life, revealing a secret chamber I never knew existed. I put the phone back exactly where I found it, my hands shaking so violently I nearly fumbled it. I had to keep moving, to pretend everything was normal, even as my reality was splintering. I gathered his clothes for the laundry, my movements robotic. As I checked his pants pockets, my fingers brushed against a crisp, folded piece of paper. I pulled it out. A receipt. From a high-end steakhouse in San Antonio, dated for that very night. San Antonio? He had told me he was meeting partners in Dallas. A tiny bitter laugh escaped my lips, a sound I didn't even recognize as my own. Michael hated driving to Dallas, always complained about the traffic. But San Antonio? San Antonio was where his mother had lived. He had fond memories of that city, a fact he mentioned often. A party of two, a bottle of expensive Cabernet Sauvignon. I knew that wine. He had bought it for our 10th anniversary, a celebration I had cherished, a memory I had held close to my heart for 30 years. Now, it was just another piece of the lie. I tried to remember the last time he had taken me to a place like that. I think it was a decade ago, when I opened my first bakery. The memory, once so bright and full of promise, now felt faded and fraudulent, a staged photograph in a scrapbook of deceit. With a silent, grim determination, I took out my own phone and snapped pictures of the receipt, of the email on his screen. I didn't want to believe it. But a woman's intuition, a wife's intuition forged over 40 years, is a deep, primal knowing. It's a knot in your stomach that tightens with every lie, a coldness in your blood that whispers the truth you're too afraid to speak aloud. Something was terribly, horribly wrong, and I could no longer look away. My hands were trembling, not just with anger now, but with a deep, existential dread. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, watching the first rocks of my life tumble into the abyss, knowing a spectacular collapse was imminent. The compulsion led me to the garage. The air was still and warm, thick with the smell of gasoline and that faint, sweet, foreign perfume that clung to his clothes. I opened the door to his SUV, a small, cold dread gripping my stomach. I turned on my phone's flashlight, the beam cutting a stark path through the darkness. I checked the driver's side, nothing but loose change and an old water bottle. But as I reached into the glove compartment on the passenger side, my fingers brushed against something plastic and slippery. I pulled it out, and my heart simply stopped. A tube of personal lubricant, used, with dried residue around the cap. It felt vile. In my hand, a tangible, sticky manifestation of my very worst fears. Michael and I hadn't been intimate in years. He always had an excuse. He was tired, work was draining, age had sapped his desire. He made me feel like it was a natural, mutual winding down. So what was this for? The question screamed in my mind, each syllable a hammer blow to the fragile remains of my reality. I stood there, frozen in the dark garage, staring at this object that had just rewritten the history of my marriage. I felt paralyzed, yet a strange, cold clarity settled over me. A survival instinct I didn't know I possessed kicked in. I placed the tube back exactly where I had found it, wiping my hands on a rag, as if I could scrub away the feeling of betrayal, the sticky residue of his infidelity. I continued my search, this time more methodically, a detective in the ruins of her own life. Under the back seat, I found them. Crumpled napkins, soaked in that same sickly sweet floral perfume. It wasn't a scent a man would wear, and it certainly wasn't my soft, familiar rose. This scent was alien, defiant, a loud, vulgar shout of another woman's presence in the one place I had felt was still solely ours. I took photos of everything, the lubricant, the napkins, as if by capturing them in pixels I could somehow contain the damage, make the betrayal manageable. I closed the car door and went back inside, the weight of the evidence pressing down on me, heavier than any sack of flour I had ever hauled in my bakery. I sat back down at the kitchen table, the same spot where this nightmare had begun. The silence was no longer just heavy. It was screaming. I picked up Michael's phone once more, my heart a block of ice in my chest. By now, I was almost certain he was having an affair. I checked his messages, only dry work-related chats. His inbox was empty, save for that one damning email. I checked the sent folder, the drafts. Nothing. It was all too clean, suspiciously pristine. He had erased his tracks, a master meticulously covering his lies. My initial shock was now crystallizing into a cold, hard rage, and with it, a new, more dangerous emotion began to stir, a desperate, unwavering need for the whole, unvarnished truth, no matter how much it destroyed me. The hunt was on. This is Auntie Anna, sharing the first painful cracks in my world. If you're listening to my story, if you've ever felt that cold knot of suspicion in your own life, please let me know you're out there. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from. Your presence comforts me. And if you want to walk with me through this entire difficult journey, please subscribe. There is so much more of the story to come, and I don't think I can tell it alone. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen curtains, a soft, golden light that felt like a lie. I was already a ghost in my own home, moving through the motions, the images of the lubricant, the receipt, and that single, devastating word, Dad, swirling in my mind like a venomous carousel. I made breakfast, the simple routine of cracking eggs and toasting bread, a small anchor in the storm that was raging inside me. The sizzle of the pan, the aroma of coffee, these were the sensations of a life that no longer felt like mine. Michael came down, his hair disheveled, his eyes still puffy with sleep. He sat at the table, took a sip of the strong black coffee I'd made him, and set the cup down, only half finished. "Big meeting today," he said, his voice a gravelly echo of the man I once knew. "I'll be home late." He didn't look at me. He was so practiced, so effortless in his deceit that it made my blood run cold. I simply nodded, a strained smile plastered on my face, and said the words expected of me. "All right, drive carefully." What I wanted to do was scream, to overturn the table and demand, "Where? With whom? In San Antonio again?" But I held my silence. My rage was a quiet, smoldering fire, and I knew that to expose it now would be to lose any chance of uncovering the truth. He gave me a pat on the shoulder, a gesture that felt hollow, an afterthought, and left. The click of the front door closing was the sound of my world shrinking, of me being left alone with a monstrous, growing certainty. I couldn't just sit there, a prisoner to my own imagination. I needed facts, hard evidence. I picked up my phone and called an old friend, Eleanor. Years ago, when I first opened the bakery, she had been my rock. She'd once told me, "Clara, if you ever need, there's a man. His name is Thomas. He's discreet." I never imagined I would need to make that call. My voice trembled as I spoke, each word an admission of my own failure, the failure of my 40-year marriage. "Eleanor, can you help me get in touch with Thomas? I need him." There was a silence on the other end, a heavy pause that understood everything. "Clara?" she finally said. "Of course." An hour later, a message arrived from Thomas himself, asking to meet at a small, quiet cafe downtown. "Mrs. Roberts," it read, "I will help you." Those 5 words were a lifeline thrown to me in a sea of lies. At noon, I sat in a secluded corner of the cafe, the smell of roasted coffee beans, usually a comfort, now feeling sharp and alien. Thomas arrived. He was a middle-aged man, unassuming, with calm, philosophical eyes that seemed to see right through the fragile veneer I was clinging to. I handed him a flash drive with all the photos, the email, the receipt, the damning tube from the glove box. "This is all I have," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I think my husband is having an affair." Saying the words out loud made them real, solid. They tasted like ash. Thomas nodded, reviewing the images with a professional detachment that was both reassuring and horrifying. He made notes in a small, leather-bound book. "Mrs. Roberts, I understand. I'll begin this afternoon. I will be discreet." I looked at him, the tears I had been holding back burning at the corners of my eyes. "Thank you," I managed. I need to know the truth." He gave me a look not of pity, but of grim understanding. "I will find it." Leaving the cafe, I walked through the bustling streets, surrounded by people living their ordinary lives, and I felt a loneliness so profound it was a physical ache. 40 years of building a life, a family, a home on what I believed was the solid ground of trust. He was my rock, my anchor, and now I was paying a stranger to follow him. The irony was a bitter pill I was forced to swallow every minute of that long, agonizing day. That evening, I tried to lose myself in the familiar comfort of my bakery, surrounded by the scent of yeast and sugar, going over delivery invoices. Then, my phone vibrated on the counter. A message from Thomas. My heart leaped into my throat, a frantic, painful drumbeat. I opened it, and the world fell away. It was a photo. Michael, in his light blue shirt, was entering a restaurant, and he was holding hands with a woman. I zoomed in, my breath catching, my hands turning to ice. It was Chloe, my daughter-in-law. She was wearing a tight black dress I'd never seen, her makeup heavy, her lips a slash of intense red. They weren't walking like a father-in-law and his son's wife. They were walking like lovers, their bodies angled towards each other, sharing a secret that was now tearing my world apart. I sank onto a stool, the phone trembling in my hand. Chloe? How was this possible? At family gatherings, they were so distant, so formal. She barely spoke to him. I saw it now for what it was, a masterful performance, a carefully choreographed dance of deception played out right in front of me, in front of my son, David. Thomas sent more, a photo of them at a secluded, candlelit table. Chloe was leaning in, smiling, and Michael was toasting her glass, his gaze fixed on her with a tenderness that shattered me. In 40 years, I had never seen him look at me like that. Not even when I was that young girl from San Diego with long, sun-kissed hair and a heart full of dreams. That look, which I had believed was reserved for the struggles and triumphs of our long life together, was now being given to her. Later, in the deep silence of the night, a video file arrived. It was 2 a.m. I put on my headphones, my hands shaking so badly I could barely press play. On the screen, Chloe leaned close to Michael's ear, whispering something that made him throw his head back and laugh, a loud, unguarded sound that was a stranger to me. Then they stood, and Michael, ever the gentleman, held the car door open for her, his hand resting on the small of her back, a gesture of possession. I watched it again and again, a self-inflicted torture, each replay another stab to my soul. Chloe, the woman I had welcomed into my family, whom I had taught to make our traditional flan, whom I had hugged as a daughter. And Michael, the man I had built a life with. What were they doing? And what about David? My sweet, loyal David. The betrayal was not just against me. It was a poison threatening to destroy our entire family. I saved everything, every photo, every second of the video onto a flash drive. My hands worked mechanically, but my mind was reeling. I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was a mountain before me, undeniable and cruel. I sat there, surrounded by the sweet, innocent pastries, and felt the walls of my life crumble to dust. This is Auntie Anna, sharing the painful moment the shadow of doubt became the concrete wall of truth. It's a difficult story to tell, but your listening makes it easier. If you're with me on this journey, please let me know in the comments. And if you haven't yet, subscribe. There is more to this story, a plan that had to be made, and I will need your strength to tell it. The following morning, I was in the small kitchen of my bakery, the scent of flour and vanilla usually a balm to my spirit, now feeling hollow. I was holding a list of orders for a large hotel downtown, my hand mechanically signing the invoice, when my phone vibrated in my apron pocket. A message from Thomas. Mrs. Roberts, I'm sending you more evidence. My heart, which I thought could sink no lower, found a new depth. I opened the message, and a new series of photos loaded onto the screen. The first showed Michael leaving a law office near the main plaza. And there, by his side, was Chloe. She was in a sharp, beige office dress, her hair in a severe high ponytail, hiding behind oversized dark sunglasses, a pathetic attempt at disguise. They were walking close, too close, their bodies speaking a language of intimacy that screamed their secret to the world. The next photo was a punch to the gut. They were standing under the gleaming awning of a 4-star hotel, its glass doors reflecting a world I was no longer part of. I zoomed in, desperately searching for a sign that this was a mistake, a misunderstanding. But there was none. They looked comfortable, natural, a couple in their element. Then the video came. I pressed play, my heart a frantic bird beating against the cage of my ribs. The shot was from a distance, but it was devastatingly clear. Michael and Chloe were on a 3rd-floor balcony of that hotel. His arm was wrapped around her waist, possessive and familiar. She rested her head on his shoulder, her long hair swaying in the breeze. And then, as if to erase any last shred of my denial, they turned and shared a kiss. It wasn't a long kiss, but it was intimate, a secret finally revealed under the open sky. I replayed it, frame by frame, each one etching the image deeper into my soul, a brand of their betrayal. The curtain behind them opened slightly, and Chloe ran out to hug him, her face alight with a joy I realized she never showed at our family dinners. I slumped into a chair, gripping the table's edge to keep from fracturing completely. Thomas wrote, "They've rented the room for the afternoon. It appears they are staying the night." I read the words over and over, my throat tight, as if invisible hands were choking me. Just hours before, Michael had texted me, "Clara, I won't be home tonight. Have to meet a potential partner from out of town. Get some rest." The message was so sweet, so caring, a perfect replica of the husband I thought I knew, a potential partner from out of town. The lie was so brazen, so calculated, it took my breath away. He wasn't out of town. He was here, in a luxury hotel, with our daughter-in-law. That night, I returned to the house that no longer felt like a home. It was a museum of my naivety. Every piece of furniture a monument to a life that was a fiction. I took out a thick envelope and a small portable hard drive. With a grim, steady hand, I printed every piece of evidence. The photos from our lawyer's office, the hotel entrance, the balcony kiss. I saved every video and audio file. Each time I hit save, I forced myself to look at the images, to sear the truth into my mind so I could never again be fooled by his performances. I hid the envelope at the bottom of a drawer beneath old family photographs. I found one of the 4 of us, Michael, David, Chloe, and me, at David's birthday a few years back. We were all smiling. Chloe was hugging David, and Michael had his arm around me, looking every inch the proud patriarch. Now, that smile looked like a sneer. That proud gaze felt like a conspiracy. I wanted to tear it to pieces. The next morning, just before dawn, I heard the front door creak open. Michael stumbled in, reeking of alcohol. "The client was impossible, Clara," he slurred, his eyes red-rimmed. "Had to drink too much. I'm exhausted." I stood in the kitchen, a glass of water in my hand, watching him, feeling like he was sprinkling salt on an open wound. "You should rest," I said, my voice eerily calm, the practiced tone of a dutiful wife. "You have work tomorrow." He nodded, gave me that same meaningless pat on the shoulder, and dragged himself to the bedroom. Minutes later, he was snoring peacefully, as if he hadn't just shattered our family, as if he hadn't spent the night in a hotel with our son's wife. When I was sure he was asleep, my phone vibrated with a call from Thomas. His voice was low, urgent. "Mrs. Roberts, I recorded their conversation in the hotel parking lot. They didn't notice. I'm sending it now." My blood ran cold. This was it. the final layer of the truth. Minutes later, the audio file appeared. I put on my headphones, sat at the kitchen table, and pressed play. The first voice I heard was Chloe's, but it was a stranger's voice. Cold, ambitious, and sharp. "Dad, you need to hurry up with that fake contract. I want that whole chain of stores. I want that old hag out of the house." The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. That old hag. She was talking about me, the woman who taught her family recipes, who hugged her, who considered her a daughter. Then Michael's voice, deep and confident, a sound I had once found reassuring. "Don't worry about the papers. Clara doesn't suspect a thing. Leave it to me. She trusts me too much." I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles turning white. It wasn't just an affair. It was a plot. They weren't just betraying my heart. They were planning to steal my life's work, my bakery chain, every sack of flour I'd hauled, every pre-dawn morning, every contract I'd signed to build my reputation from nothing. It was all mine. Michael had never once gotten his hands dirty in my kitchen, and now he and Chloe were scheming to take it all away, to forge documents and kick me out of my own home. The betrayal was so much deeper, so much more vile than I had ever imagined. The rage that filled me then was cold, clear, and terrifying. It was no longer just about a broken heart. It was about survival. I'm sharing the moment I discovered the true depth of their deception. It's one thing to lose a husband's love, but to find he is a co-conspirator in the theft of your very soul. That is a different kind of pain. Your presence, your listening, is a comfort. Please, if you are with me, let me know in the comments. And if you haven't yet, subscribe. The final part of this story, the reckoning, is the hardest to tell, and I will need you by my side. A cold, clear resolve settled over me in the days that followed. The grief was still there, a vast, dark ocean inside me, but on its surface, a steely calm had taken hold. They had moved beyond betrayal into outright theft, and I would not let them strip me of everything I had built with my own two hands. The plan formed in my mind not as a burst of anger, but as a grim, necessary conclusion. They had chosen their path, and now I would choose mine. The first step was a small, symbolic act of reclamation. While Michael snored, drunk and oblivious, I took his car keys from the nightstand. In the quiet of the garage, I opened the glove compartment. There it was, that tube of lubricant, a monument to their sordid secret. I took it to the kitchen, and with hands that did not shake, I carefully unscrewed the cap. From my tool drawer, I took a tube of clear, industrial-strength superglue, the kind I'd use to fix a bakery shelf. Methodically, I filled the lubricant tube with it, wiping the nozzle clean. It looked identical. I placed it back in the exact same position, a silent, waiting trap for their next illicit rendezvous. It was a small thing, but it was my first act of taking back control. I then laid a more public trap. I told Michael I had to travel to Nashville to sign a major contract for the bakery. The flicker of relief in his eyes was unmistakable. He wanted me gone. "Don't worry, go ahead. I'll handle things here," he said, his voice dripping with false concern. I knew exactly what he would handle. I made sure of it. Before I pretended to leave, I hid Daniel's old voice-activated recorder behind the bookshelf in our bedroom, right next to the bed. I needed to hear it from their own mouths, one last time. Instead of going to the bus station, I went across the street to my neighbor Eleanor's house. From her window, I watched. Just as I knew he would, Michael ushered a nervously glancing Chloe into our home, into my bedroom. I put in my earbuds and connected to the live feed from the recorder. The sounds I heard, their laughter, the familiar creak of our bed, their whispered plans, were a searing brand of humiliation. But I endured it. I waited. And then it came. A sharp, panicked cry from Chloe. "What the hell is this? Michael, we're stuck." His gruff, flustered response. "Be quiet, I can't move." A cold, grim satisfaction filled me. The industrial glue was doing its job, holding them together in their most shameful moment. It was time. With a tap on my phone, I activated the final part of my plan. A remote switch I'd rigged to a pan of oil on the kitchen stove. Thick, black smoke immediately began billowing from the window. Eleanor gasped. "Clara, your house." Neighbors spilled into the street, shouting, pointing. Someone called the fire department. I stood there, my heart a steady, determined drum, and watched the scene unfold. The sirens wailed, growing closer. And then my heart truly broke. The first firefighter off the truck was my David, my son, in his chief's uniform, his face a mask of professional duty and fear for his home. "There might be people inside," he yelled to his team. He took a sledgehammer and broke down his own front door. I listened through the earbuds as he burst into the bedroom. The silence that followed was more deafening than any scream. Then his voice shattered, disbelieving. What is this?" In the background, I heard the horrified gasps of his crew, the desperate, pleading whimpers of Chloe, and Michael's furious, humiliated roars for them to get out. The truth was exposed in the most brutal public way imaginable. They were carried out on stretchers, tangled together, wrapped in thin sheets that did nothing to hide their shame from the gawking, whispering neighborhood. The video was online in minutes. The father-in-law and the daughter-in-law. The scandal was complete. At the hospital, I played the part of the concerned, shocked wife one last time. I even brought them ointment for their situation. But the tubes I handed the nurse contained not a healing balm, but a thick, hot mustard. Let their physical pain be a small reminder of the inferno they had lit in my life. When their screams of fresh agony echoed down the hall, I felt nothing but a hollow finality. David arrived then, his face ashen. He handed me the thick envelope of evidence I'd asked him to retrieve. I looked at Michael and Chloe, their faces pale with pain and humiliation. My voice was calm, flat, the voice of a woman who had shed her last tear for them. 40 years of marriage end here, I said, placing the divorce papers on the hospital tray. Sign them, and then disappear from my son's life and mine. Their pleas, their excuses were just noise. The story was over. Now my bakery is busier than ever. People call me strong. They don't know that strength is just the scar tissue that forms over a wound that never fully heals. David lives with me now. We don't talk about it much. We just work, side by side, in the quiet sanctuary of the bakery, rebuilding our lives from the flower-dusted ruins. We have each other, and I have myself again. This is Auntie Anna, thanking you for walking with me through this painful truth. Your comments, your stories, your presence from all over the world have been a light in a very dark time. If my story has resonated with you, please share your own strength in the comments below. And if you want to stand with others finding their way, subscribe to the channel. There are many more stories of life, love, and resilience to share. Thank you for your sweet support. With love and respect, always, Auntie Anna.